Welcome to Horizons of Thought. Today I'm going to talk to you about minimum wage laws and universal basic income. Minimum wage laws are relatively self-evident. They set the floor, the minimum amount of money that you can be paid for every hour you work in gainful employment. The effect of minimum wage laws is twofold. One of the effects is the people at the bottom of an income distribution might find themselves earning more money if they have a job. In contrast, if you don't have a job and you don't have a lot of skills, you can find that it's harder to get a job. And the reason is very simple. If you're an employer and you find yourself having to pay people more money, you need to justify paying them more money. You need them to be productive enough that it's worth having them on the payroll. And if they aren't productive enough, you're not likely to hire them. Maybe you'll create training programs instead that train them up a little bit quicker. That's useful. But odds are you're going to start trying to do more with fewer workers in order to make up for the fact that your workers now cost more. The real world effect of something like this depends on what the typical wage per hour was before and after the minimum wage. Imagine you have a society where on average people are making about $6 an hour at the bottom of the income distribution for the kinds of low-skill labor that they do at the bottom of the income distribution. You make a minimum wage that goes up to say $6.50. If you're an economist and you're studying changes in the behavior of companies and businesses with such a small minimum wage increase, you may find nothing. You may only find that you've improved the quality of life of the poor people in this area and you haven't seen any drop in employment or anything else like this. But at the same time, if you were to try to make that minimum wage go to $15 an hour, you would find quite a bit of differences. A lot of jobs that exist off of low-skill labor that don't make a lot of money for the businesses involved might not exist anymore. In the United States, this kind of thing happened with hand-done car washes in many places, leaving only a few places that do really super skilled detailed work, but hand-done simple car washes found themselves unable to continue to operate as minimum wages went up, especially in California. You may find more serious versions of that, though, if you do a jump all the way from $6 or $7 to $15 an hour. So one of the things that's worth noting is when people propose big increases to minimum wage, you've got to ask yourself why. Amazon.com, run by Jeff Bezos, has proposed that the United States go to a national-wide $15 an hour minimum wage. That might seem on the surface like a good idea, and it might seem like their motives are good and pure to help the poor. But if you're a big company like Amazon.com and you have a lot of automation, you can make your workers very efficient and you can pay them that amount of money. Their work might be boring and miserable and hellish, but you can make sure that they're worth their $15 an hour when you hire them. You can also make sure that other companies that don't have your automation and don't have all of your systems in place are no longer able to operate as electronic storefronts, thus getting rid of the competition, forcing the owners of those companies to sell to you at cheap prices and allowing you to take over more markets. This is a form of weaponizing policy. It isn't being done to help the poor, it's being done to help consolidate power of a company. Now, I want you to think about that as I move on to talk about universal basic income and the alternatives. Many countries have welfare programs, and many welfare programs are designed to top up or add to your income if you have no job or if you have a job that doesn't pay quite enough to help you live in an environment. But a lot of these welfare systems also have rules that take back the money that the government gives you as you work more. That can have a very interesting and negative effect on people. Imagine that you get a bunch of money from the government and they take it away from you once you've got a job. That job now needs to pay you enough to make it worth your while. The amount of money that the government gave you before versus what the job earns really can't just be the same, because nobody's going to want to make, say, $10,000 a year working really hard, 37.5 to 40 hours a week, when they can make the same amount of money doing absolutely nothing. If your welfare system does not take that kind of basic human behavior into account, you can disincentivize work. You can also create welfare systems that pay unfairly to people who are living together or who are married. Instead of giving them twice as much as they would make each being single, you can create a situation where they're given less. You think you don't need to give them more because it's cheaper for two people to live together than one. But if you do things like this with poor enough people, you disincentivize those poor people from living together or being married, which can have incredibly harmful effects on the raising of children, because children raised in families with two parents do a lot better than children raised in families of one parent. The studies on this have been going on for decades. The results are thoroughly understood, well known in the literature, and not particularly questionable, actually. So if you create a situation where you disincentivize people staying together in your welfare program, you will hurt the outcome of children, and you will diminish the productivity of your society as time goes on. You will increase crime, you will increase abuse, and you will hurt people. So with that, I'm going to talk to you about two kinds of proposals that I've seen here in New Zealand. One of which is described by a group called the Opportunities Party, and they are proposing a universal basic income of $250 a week for every adult person in the country. This universal basic income is paid to everybody, whether you're rich or poor, whether you need it or not. And as you earn money, you get to keep what you earn taxed at a 33% tax rate right away, instead of having a progressive tax rate that goes up to 33% as you reach around $70,000 in this country. This is important. If you're going to propose something that really changes your economy as radically as a universal basic income will, you need to also figure out how in the world you're going to pay for this. You might pay for this because universal basic income is essentially going to give money to businesses very quickly, because people will have more money to spend and they'll spend it. You'll get some of that back in taxation, and that helps pay for this kind of thing. No giveaway of tax money from a government is ever as big as it seems, and no savings of tax money from a government is ever as big as it seems, because you affect an entire system, and the system moves money over and over again through it. You pay people money, they pay merchants, the merchants pay taxes, then they can pay people with that, and that cycle continues. So it's very important to remember that you will pay for a system like this both through changes in taxes and through changes in your societal structure. Now, let me compare this to a program. I don't know if the Green Party still has this now, but they had this a while ago, where they had proposed a $350 a week minimum income, but it was not a universal basic income. The idea is if you work and you don't make $350 a week, they're going to make sure that you get at least $350 a week no matter what. Notice the difference between those two. Between the amount of money you earn from $0 to $350 a week in income, you don't get any extra. So imagine you're working very hard, maybe 30 hours a week, you're making $350 a week. Another person is working 0 hours a week and they're making $350 a week. How do you feel working all that hard and getting the same amount as somebody who isn't working at all? It can be very hard to get up in the morning and go to work under circumstances like that. You can seriously disincentivize work. You disincentivize work, people forget how to be productive. They don't feel as good about themselves. They don't know how to do things as well. They get bored more easily. This is a recipe for making a very self-destructive society. Doesn't seem like a huge difference to have a universal basic income and make sure that you don't take back some of the money as people earn money, versus having something where you make sure there's a minimum amount of income, but you take that back quickly. You might think you're saving a lot of money. After all, if people work, they don't need this help, so why should you give them this help? It should be cheaper, right? But the societal change that's being described in this scenario is so different, and you need to think about what that would be. I've obviously given a strong opinion here that I think a universal basic income is better than a old-fashioned welfare system that makes sure you have a minimum income but also takes back from your earnings very quickly. But there are still issues that are going to happen with universal basic income. Imagine now there's far less pressure on people. Everybody has a minimum amount of money. It's going to pretty much pay for rent and a little bit of food for people. It won't necessarily keep you comfortable. It won't necessarily let you have any fun, but it will take pressure off and make it harder for you to reach a zero sum of money, which can be very devastating for you. But at the same time, you're an employer and you want to hire people. Now you have all these people who you know have a minimum floor. They're being taken care of a certain amount. You're more likely to not support increases in minimum wages, but actually let the economic system just figure that one out for itself. That might seem bad. Probably also more likely to be willing to hire people for much shorter periods of time. There's actually a world full of people who have these rather strangish disabilities where they're competent and they're capable and they can work really hard 1 day a week, maybe 2 days a week. But then their bodies start screaming in pain and they can't work any harder than that. Those people are often given a kind of welfare to help them survive minimally because they can't work. But if you had something like a universal basic income and you have people in this situation, they might be able to work 1 day a week. You leave that money alone for them and only tax it at 33%. They get to keep 66%, which is most of it. They can have a better life. They can still feel productive. They can actually be productive because they are able to work 1 day a week, and their situation can be made better this way. This is another kind of effect that can happen. The thing that is likely to happen with a universal basic income as a result is it won't just be for people with disabilities. You'll end up with a massive increase in part-time work period. One, because people will want to work part-time rather than full-time more. And two, because employers also often benefit from systems like this, especially in countries that have very high benefits packages that are tied to people working full-time and not tied to people working part-time. It can be a lot cheaper to hire 2 people at 20 hours a week than can be hire 1 person at 40 hours a week. So even with a universal basic income, which can be better than a traditional welfare system for the reason I've described, you still have to be very careful about the ongoing effects of that policy on your society. There are many, many other things I could discuss here, but I'm already at about 13 minutes. And at that, I'm going to say, if you can think of anything else that could be a positive or negative effect of a universal basic income, let me know in the comments below. And I will do a second follow-up video on this topic, talking about the ideas you're talking about and what we know already. If you think, oh, these are just guesses, that's fair too. Because right now we have never had anywhere in the world a test of universal basic income for real. We've had tiny pilot projects where small percentages of the population have this, but that's not going to tell you anything. We don't know if we'll still end up creating a whole class of people who decide they'd rather surf than work because now they've got just enough money to surf once in a while and go hide on couches in people's basements, whatever. Maybe that will end up happening. Then again, maybe we'll have more champion surfers because of it too. We don't know. And that's one of the things that happens when you try to implement big social changes, is that you can find yourself with lots of little subtle things that happen. And it's worth thinking about all of the possibilities, positive and negative, before you propose big social changes. I might, and in fact do, like the idea of a universal basic income myself, but I can see where this could go very badly wrong if it's implemented wrong. And it can go disastrously wrong if somebody decides, let's go back to a welfare model of this and take it away from people who are richer. That can become incredibly disastrous, and that can spread from generation to generation to generation. So even with good ideas, there are many risks, and you have to be careful about how you're going to prevent those risks from happening and what a society can do to undo the damage of policies that were once good and are becoming bad. If you liked this episode, please click like. If you disliked it, click dislike. Again, if you have any thoughts or comments, please put them below. If you wish to support this channel, please go below to my donor box link. In the donor box link, you can subscribe to this channel. Monthly subscriptions get benefits based on what I describe in the monthly subscription list at DonorBox. Thank you for watching Horizons of Thought, and see you in a few days.